9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we should be streaming live at this point. So I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. And just like to recognize that we sit on Ohlone, Muwekma, and Chochenyo land. And then moving forward to the ceremonial quote, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And now if we could go ahead and do a roll call. So I'm going to go ahead and go down the participants tab and call people as I see them. So just 1 second. So Sharon Coco.
I'm here.
Thank you. And from staff, Brian Kilgore.
Here.
Kelly McMahon.
Here.
Cool. From the committee, Brian Gebhardt.
Present.
Thank you. From the committee, William Bill Rojek.
Present.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise, thank you.
Oh, these move on the participants tab, so I'm just going to go back to how I see them on the screen. And Crosby, Trustee Crosby.
Present.
Thank you. Mary Vigil.
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Judy Nye.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle HartmanGruber.
Here.
Thank you. Connie Ton from Banner, is that right?
Yes. Here.
Thank you. Cecily Lee from the committee.
Present.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Eric Chu from staff.
I'm here.
Cool, thank you. Malia Santos from the committee.
Here.
Cool. And then I believe we have our streamer is the other person, but there is another Kelly McMahon. So is there someone who I haven't introduced who is not responsible for the live video feed?
I think that's Tyler, who's doing the streaming, the last Kelly McMahon. Oh, there's a new one.
There's 2. There's 3 right now. Okay, there's Gerald. Hey, Gerald. From Banner. Could you remind me your last name?
Green, Greene. I'm
Thank
posting
you.
Kelly right now.
Got it. And then there are 2 other Kelly McMahons. Okay, 3. If you could introduce yourselves. Anybody who hasn't introduced themselves for purposes of roll call. So the reason I need that is because I believe, let me check real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and check the membership roll.
While you're doing that, Antonio, Sharon, you can make Antonio a co-host. I think if you go to the right corner of his video and the 3 dots, there might be an option that pops up in the menu there to make him a co-host. Don't know if you heard me, Sharon. You're on mute if you did.
Sorry. 3 dots where, Brian?
Upper right corner of his video, there's 3 dots will appear when you move your mouse over it. And you click on those 3 dots, it give you a lot of options. One of them should be co-host, I'm hoping.
I don't see the 3 dots. Let me go down here. Maybe there's 3 dots that says participants, invite. No.
Oh no, and that's fine. I realize this currently we have 14 seated members and we have at least 8 members here, so we do have a quorum, so we can go ahead and continue. But if we could get, oh okay, and I see Henry Fung is here. Great. Okay, So we can move to the next part of the agenda. So we've completed roll call. Now we can go ahead and adopt the agenda. Unless there's any objection, I'd like to go ahead and adopt the agenda.
So, a minor objection. I wanted to add a few minutes, perhaps, for the new members to introduce themselves, or perhaps all of us to introduce as a welcoming.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Great. So why don't we do that during the staff update?
Sure.
So we'll add 5 minutes to the agenda, and people can introduce introduce themselves. Okay, so with that amendment, does anybody have any objection to that amendment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a vote to adopt the agenda as amended. So if either people could, let's see, we've done this several ways. If you could turn on your video and raise your physical hand. And so this is kind of just a test to see how we're going to try to vote. So all voting members, if you could go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to adopt the agenda as amended. Please do so now. Okay, I see 5 votes in the affirmative. All right, please lower your hands. 6. Any opposed?
Just give me a minute.
All right, the ayes have it. And who just joined?
Cecily Lee. I just am joining from my computer instead.
Got it. Cool. Cool. All right, so now we can move to the approval of the minutes / notes, and that's in Exhibit A. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
This is Sharon. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting the minutes, or unless there's discussion, I see none. All in favor of adopting the minutes as recorded in Exhibit A, please raise your either physical hands or virtual hands. Okay, please lower your hands. All opposed? Okay, great, thanks. So the minutes are passed as described in Exhibit A. Now I'll move to oral and written communications. I've reviewed our inbox. We have none. So we can move forward to the staff update. And so I'll hand it over. Oh, first we are going to go ahead and introduce one another. So I did a general roll call, but I would like to first start by welcoming the new members to the committee. So I have Robert, who is rejoining the committee. I have Cecily Lee and William Rojek, and please correct me if my mispronunciation is off. But if any of you 3 could introduce yourselves, that'd be great. If you want to just say what attendance area you're from, maybe anything about, general background. Let's start with Bill Rojek.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I go by Bill, but I will answer to either William or Bill. So as mentioned, I am the newest committee member. This is my first meeting. I would represent the Washington High School area. I live along Fremont. I've been here in the Fremont area for 3 years now, or just over 3 years, new to California. And so definitely have a background sort of appropriate for this role and sort of the work that this committee is chartered with. And definitely want to volunteer more, get involved in my community and the school where my daughter attends. And so that's what brought me to apply for and sit on this committee. I'm currently a Kaiser employee. Kaiser's what brought me to California, and been with Kaiser ever since. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. Cecily?
Hi, I'm Cecily Lee. You're saying it correctly. And I actually grew up in Fremont. I went to Brookfield, Thornton, and American. And now I'm living in the Olivera attendance area. And I have 4 little kids, 2 of them who go to Olivera. So I thought it was time to get involved. So I'm just here to volunteer time.
And someone we know very well, but if you could reintroduce yourself as you're rejoining the committee, Robert.
I am Robert. From the admission attendance area. My kids have graduated, but I still help out, and I've been around for a number of years in various different capacities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. And then Brian, was your thought to have the other members introduce ourselves to the new members?
I thought, yeah, it looked like we had enough time that we might be able to do that.
Yeah, we usually do. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. So I'll just list some names. So I'll go down the path again, like we did in roll call. So if you want to mention any comments about yourselves, let's keep this generally brief, but nevertheless. So Trustee Crosby.
Thank you. My name is Ann Crosby. I'm a school board trustee. I'm coming to the end of the 8th year as a trustee, and I will be leaving the board. So Bill, as you come in, I'm exiting. I have 4 children who have graduated from schools in Fremont Unified, and I want to just thank you all for taking on the work of this committee, and Antonio for doing such a good job of leading.
Hello, Hi, I'm Brian Gebhardt, a Washington parent of 2, a Centerville and a Washington high school student. Also been a board member from 2008 to 2012, and I've served in a variety of facilities and other committees. Thank you.
Mary?
Yes, my name's Mary Vigil. I represent the CESA union, and I have 2 grown boys that went through Washington High School, and I've been on the board now for about over 2 years.
The board of CSEA?
No, sitting on this board.
Oh, the committee. Got it.
The committee, okay. Yes. I'm so sorry. Committee.
Got it. Trustee Jones?
Yeah, I'm Diane Jones. I'm a trustee. I'm starting my 3rd year. And I'm also a parent. I have 2 graduates and 1 student still left at Washington.
Thank you. Brian Kilgore.
Everybody, I'm Brian Kilgore. I am in my 7th year as the Public Information Officer for the school district and work out of the superintendent's office. And I handle the minutes for all committee meetings.
Thank you. Judy Nye.
Hi there, I'm Judy Nye. I am the FSMA, the Management Association representative, and I'm the principal at Grimmer Elementary School. This is my 12th year already at Grimmer. And I have 2 grown children that have gone through Fremont schools as well.
Thank you. Michelle HartmanGruber.
Hi there, Michelle HartmanGruber here. I represent SEIU. I started off with Fremont Unified back from my father in 1962, and we have been associated with the school district ever since through his employment, through my husband went to Kennedy, I went to Irvington, my daughter went to Mission, so I think we kind of covered a lot of the area. So, and now I also am an employee of Fremont Unified along with my husband. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly LynchMcMahon. I'm the Director of Facilities for Fremont Unified. I've only been on this committee since March of this year, and so learning a lot and enjoying working with everybody here to get Fremont the best that it deserves.
Thanks. Gerald?
Yeah, hi, Gerald Green. I am the program manager for Banner Construction Management. We are the program managers for the Measure E facilities bond. I've been on the program just under a year now, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Malia?
Hi, I'm Malia Santos. I use they, them pronouns, and I am representing Surfboard E, Students United for the Representation of the Fremont Board of Education. I've only been on this committee since about summer of this year, but it is nice to hear all the input from everyone and the good ideas, and I'm happy to be here as well.
Thank you. Eric?
Hello, I'm Eric Chiu. I'm the Senior Project Manager of Fremont Unified School District Facilities. I've been with the district for 2 years, majorly handle non-bond projects, but right now it's also helping out some of the bond projects. So happy to be here.
Thanks. Sharon?
Hello, I'm Sharon Coco, and I am currently serving on FAC as a community member in the American attendance area. I worked for Fremont Unified for 39 years before retiring, and my 2 children went through the schools here, and I currently have a grandson attending Thornton Junior High.
Awesome. Connie?
Hi everyone, I'm Connie Ton. I'm a financial administrator with Banner Construction Management. I provide overall program cost control for the Measure E bond projects. I'm happy to be here too.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Henry?
Hi, my name is Henry, and I'm a teacher at Irvington, and I'm here representing the teacher union. Happy to be here, and nice to be able to work with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Liz?
Yes, my name is Liz Fisher. I'm the parent of 2 Washington grads. This is my 3rd year on the FAC, and I also serve on the 7-Eleven committee.
Thank you. And my name is Antonio Berbe Carrera. I serve as your chair. Sorry, if you could, Sharon, if you could either make me host. I had to put Pon in the waiting room as his term ended. But my name is Antonio Berbe Carrera, and I serve as your chair. I've had the pleasure of doing so for the last 2 and odd change years. My son currently attends Washington High, and I have another one that will be attending FUSD schools soon enough. And so thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. And now we'll go ahead and move to the staff update. Kelly?
Hi, I just want, it's going to be a, excuse me, a short update so that I don't turn and have a coughing spell. Let's see. Generally, the facilities department, we're relatively quiet right now in terms of anything new going on. As I shared with the CBOC meeting before this meeting, we currently have 3 projects that'll be closing out by year end. So American High has been 100% accepted and will be sent to the board for notice of completion and acceptance. Walters High School, I believe that formal closeout has not occurred, so we will be submitting that notice of completion as well. Horner Middle School is about 97% complete, and so we are working on finalizing a bunch of punch list items, and all the building systems are being tested, and we're working very closely with the site staff to ensure that all of their various creature comforts and wish list items that should have been included in the scope of work are taken care of before the contractor actually demobilizes. So there is an additional project that was added very late in the process at Horner, which is the PE locker rooms. And so that particular scope of work is in DSA for review right now, and we're waiting on that to come back. And once that does come back, we want to, of course, get that set up, built, and completed prior to school starting in the fall. So that is what's going on at Horner. We have also in parallel some work that's going to be going on at Hirsch this winter/spring. So Hirsch, because they were directly adjacent to Horner, they were impacted by a lot of the construction that occurred at the Horner site. So we are now kind of closing up fencing where there were gaps due to areas that were exposed due to old fencing being taken down and new fencing not being put up. So we're putting in a new parking lot there where originally there was parking. Hirsch and Horner shared parking, but when they separated the campuses and built the new play areas, it created a void for Hirsch to have additional parking. So we're going to be taking care of that with the M&O department over the next few weeks to add a new parking lot that will accommodate, I believe it's up to 25 spaces with 3 handicap accessible spaces. And we verified with the principal that that's sufficient for her to have appropriate parking for all of her staff and possibly 5 or 6 guests that, you know, may come to the school throughout the day. And of course, there's street parking available. We're doing a paving project also at Hirsch to refresh some of their hardscape areas where the children play their handball games and the basketball. And I think there's the 4 square. I forgot the name of that game, but anyway, that's what's going on at Horner and Hirsch. Your middle school conversions are all either under DSA review or they have already started construction. So the 3 that are currently in the process of design or early stages of construction are Thornton Middle School. Thornton Middle School has all of the play fields are now installed, and we are now starting work on the foundations and structure of the new 2-story building that will be going on campus. The next is Centerville and Centerville Middle School. We actually have the contractor who has mobilized on site, and they are working on a scope of work that is complementary and also in parallel with the Alameda County Water District. So we have a resolution as well as a board action that will be coming to the next board meeting where we will be providing and granting an easement as well as the street section of our property back to Alameda County Water District so that we no longer are responsible for any work or any activities that occur in the street, even though the property line goes to the center of the street. So we're annexing that back from the center of the street to just inside the curb to the Alameda County Water District so that any repairs or damages or anything that occurs from work being done in that area does not fall on the district in terms of responsibility. So that work is going on, as well as Centerville is starting minor demolition and site utility work. So I'm sure if you guys drive by, you see the fencing has been put up. They've got the trailers started. And so we're kind of getting ready for all of the big stuff to occur beginning sometime mid to late January. So that's going on there. And then Hopkins is the last middle school conversion. That is finalizing approval in DSA. And we are in the process of clearing the site and working with the site staff to, excuse me, begin coordination of packing and moving of various classrooms that are going to be reoriented during the modernization period. So that work is starting and ramping up, and meetings are being scheduled, and those kinds of activities will occur. But Hopkins, you won't see any real construction begin until mid-January to late January, and it'll be all sort of site utility underground kind of stuff going on. As far as our other projects go, the Rick Sklankler site is another project that we will be bringing an update to the board this month to review the design as well as the scope of work that's been developed, that we've been working with the design consultants and site staff to provide a comprehensive and very sort of organically based program for those students at that site. There'll also be a presentation to update on Centerville and Hopkins for their designs as well. So you guys can expect to see those at the next board meeting. And Eric, Lila Bringhurst. How can I forget that? So Lila Bringhurst, our last board meeting, the board issued a notice of completion and authorized the superintendent to work directly with the developers to get that project to completion. We have since, excuse me, I think last Friday, we received notice of completion from the developers that now has to be filed with the county and begins the actual process of us to now be engaged of getting the project actually turned back over to Fremont Unified. We're in negotiations with the developer to finalize the expenses of the project, so I don't have that information to share with you all. And in terms of a timeline as to when that will be completed, I also don't have any additional information because since we are in negotiations, that has to be determined when that process is over. But it will probably take us anywhere from 30 to 45 days once that actual document is received and agreed by all parties. We then can, from that point forward, begin the process of taking ownership of Lila Bringhurst. So that's a huge, huge thing. We're super excited, and we're working very closely with the contractor and the maintenance and operations department to ensure that all staff have been trained and all of the building systems have been tested and that everything is in good working order. And as my uncle always said, fit as a fiddle before we take it back and take ownership of it. I think that's all I can think of right now with regard to projects. But how am I on time, Antonio? Because I know I'm talking really fast. So
I took you at your word that you wouldn't take up 15 minutes, so I didn't time you.
Okay.
And it seems like it hasn't taken that.
Okay.
Are there questions? Otherwise, I have one. My question is on the easement. So for what property is this? And does the easement itself like grant, obligations to the water district? Because my understanding is an easement is just, essentially giving permission for someone to use your land in the case of utilities. Yeah.
So this is for the Centerville Project. And so it's actually an easement and also granting of property. And I wish I had a visual to show you. So the way that the property line is set for Centerville, way back in like 1930 or something, I guess that used to be a farm, or, I mean, everything in Fremont used to be farms back then. But the property line was established before the street was actually built. And so no one ever went back and did a reboundary of that site. So when the Alameda County Water District approached the school district, said, hey, we're doing an upgrade project, but we need to actually, tear up the street and tear up the sidewalk. And you happen to have that as part of your property line. And we were like, oh, well, we don't want to own the street, because then that actually makes us obligated to handle any risk associated with it, any cost associated with the repairs, and any damages that if someone happens to damage something, it falls on the district. So our legal counsel and Alameda County Water District have been communicating over the last couple months to actually create the areas where the property line falls in the street. We are basically deeding that back to them. So they take ownership of it. And our property line then gets reset or reboundaried to just on the inside of the sidewalk. So because now the city owns the sidewalks and they're responsible for that type of work that goes on there. So that now removes us from having responsibility for anything that happens in the street. But there's an area that's, and I forgot the name of the street, where there's a little bit, a green band that it's where the handicap accessible ramps occur to go to the street, but yet there's planting and it's sort of a very decorative little area. They don't want that. And so we don't necessarily want to give it up because it's not in the right of way for the sidewalk, but it's also not in the street. So that small area is where we're giving them an easement to now then still provide them access as they turn the corner to go to the other street where additional work is occurring. So it's an easement, but it's also the deeding back based on this configuration of how the boundary goes. So I hope that is clarification for you.
That did. Is this half of the street deeded back to the water district or the city?
It's actually going to be deeded back to the water district.
Oh, okay.
Because their pipes, wherever their pipes lay, they want to have full possession of that property. So
okay.
That's how that is going to be worked out.
Got it. Michelle?
Yeah, as an old title person, being that you're deeding this back, does that mean we're going to see a minimal reduction in the property tax? Has that been figured into it as well?
That is something that is being discussed with legal counsel. And part of this particular, I don't want to say it's a deal because we're not like, we're not negotiating a deal or sale or anything. The water district, for the work that they're doing, they are not going to charge the district for the work that we need for the school project. So it's almost like a trade where, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this work for you. And usually we have to pay a sizable fee to the water district for any upgrades or modifications to the water system coming into the site. They're waiving that on this particular transaction. And so that is valued at around $27,000 worth of fees that we in essence are being forgiven because we are going to go ahead and give them back the property that their equipment and utilities will be existing in. And so legal counsel thought it was a pretty good deal. And because we are eliminating our risk, that's where we're really excited because now we are totally relieved of any responsibility for anything associated with that. But yes, to answer your question, yes, we will have a smaller footprint, so it should be translated into dollars in some way.
Robert?
I have a question about Laylahurst. In the past, we have not opened that school because we didn't have enough students to attend. Is that a separate issue from taking ownership of the school, or are we planning to open the school now?
That's a totally separate issue, and there are several discussions that are being had right now as to what we're going to do with Laylahurst. So I don't have any information to share with this body as to what the intended use will be at this moment, but we are working on several options to be considered and brought to the board sometime in January.
Awesome, thank you. I believe that concludes the staff update unless anybody has anything else. Otherwise, I think we're tracking on time. So we can go ahead and move to the introduction to the long-range facilities plan process. I had asked Brian to chair this part of the meeting in large part because he has experience handling, this kind of process. I did speak with Ms. McMahon, and unfortunately the district doesn't have too many details on the subtopics that we've identified, in part because the conversations with the necessary consultants have not happened. They'll happen later this month. Let me first hand it off to, well, actually I'll hand the chair to Brian, but also hand it over to Kelly to provide any other detail aside from what I've said. But go ahead.
All right, thank you, Antonio. I was thinking about what would be the best use of this time, and actually my suggestion would be to spend a few minutes taking a look at the outcome of the last long-range facilities master planning process. And I think maybe that context might help as we think about what each of those categories there. So if I'm able to share my screen, if there's a way, then
let me see if I can give you that permission.
And while he's doing that, so we're going to start with page 1 and we're going to go all the way through to page 351. Just kidding.
Can you, so maybe because I'm co-host, I can't do it. Are you not able to?
Host disabled, participant screen sharing, it says.
Okay. Sharon, can you make him host? I think co-hosts have more limited abilities.
Isn't there a command too that she can say multiple users to be able to share?
It's possible, but that might end up more complicated. Sorry, Sharon, can you confirm?
Sorry, if I hit share the screen at the bottom of mine, will that allow?
I don't share your screen.
No, Dad. Well, I got nothing to share, so that won't help you.
No,
oh, wait, there it is.
Over it and kind of click to the side.
Wait, Brian, try now.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I've made it so that all participants can share. I trust that no one else will be Zoom bombing. So, all right.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully you guys can see my screen now. And what we have here, I'll go through. I'm going to go through the whole thing briefly. Please hold your questions, and then you can welcome questions. This is the presentation to the board, January 15th, 2014, right? And the meeting in which I believe the board adopted the long-range facilities plan, almost 7 years ago. And this presentation includes the approach, and I think this is a good context of not saying that this is how our consultant or how Kelly and staff will recommend doing it this time, but I put this out here as context for how it was done last time. And this is really the output, right? This is looking at the output. We can answer questions about the process along the way, and happy to do that as well. But this has an overview of the process, an identification of the urgent needs, what was the approach to prioritizing projects, and what is the final recommended list, and then what we thought that would cost in 2014 dollars. And so you can see that this process involved school site committees. It involved a large long-range facilities planning committee that I believe was 20, 30, maybe 40 people. I was on that. Surveys, board, and there was also an executive steering committee that helped, a combination of staff and members of the community committee that helped steer the whole process. And this is an example of the final list of urgent needs identified by school site that were shared in this presentation. And we're not going to go through each and every item. So I'm going to skip through these. But this became the basis for our communication to the community about the school bond. And it is still the basis of the facilities, of the Measure E facilities plan today. Those projects that were identified. So to answer the question of why did we pick these projects, we came up with the prioritization framework. And it really boiled down to 3 core priorities. Health and safety, projects related to health and safety. Oh, let me back up. What's not part of this is, so when you look at everything we'd like to do for our facilities to give our kids the facilities they deserve, I believe it was like 1.6 billion in 2014 dollars. Now, for context, Measure E was a $640 million bond, which was the largest bond, I think, in Alameda County, certainly at the time. And it was also the largest bond we could possibly float under the law. So there's some constraints to how we go after the funding. But, and so how do we prioritize what we go after first in that 1.6 million? And these were the 3 categories: health and safety, increasing capacity, because at the time we were seeing a surge in capacity that led to the plan to expand our schools into middle schools. There were also program reasons for making them middle schools, because a lot of curriculum and most of the state is in a middle school, 6th through 8th grade configuration. And then last, technology was a priority. And how were these priorities picked? Well, obviously they were picked based on the needs. They were picked based on, but they were also picked, I think, based on what we felt the community would support, based on some of the polling that was done as well. So there was a variety of factors in settling on these as the priorities. I'm trying, I know I'm going through this really fast, but so and I'm happy to go back to anything you're like I want to see more of that. And then to kind of bottom line it here. Okay, cool. Here, this is the 2-page. So this is like you take all those urgent needs, those slides I rushed through with my school by school. And in 2014 dollars, these were the total estimates at the time for elementary, high school, and middle school. And that gave us, oh, here is the total identified need, $1.6 billion in 2014 dollars. And this was the top recommended projects. And in 2014 dollars, knowing it with escalation and things would come up, this became the target, even though we could float a bond. We achieved a bond of $640 million. We knew that we would need that cushion for that. And, okay, so I think that is and then so if you actually look here, there's a document you can go download. This is the 351-page document, and it's got some great sections in it. A couple I wanted to mention, and these are things. Let's see here, guiding principles that were driving the plan, and these are some of the guiding principles just defined. And then you can see that this is some of the programmatic priorities, right? You know, what school size do we want to target, and what are our target school sizes, for example? Security, what do we want our standards around security to be? And I should mention, staff has done a lot of work and done a lot of updates on these in the intervening years, but I thought it was useful for you to see these elements of the plan. And it goes into lots of scope description as well, in terms of the type of scope that's involved in the plan. And I think the last thing I wanted to point out was in this section, which is the overview section, but I thought that it was useful to see the timeline of the last plan, to get a sense for how big of an effort this is or can be. You know, it started in February 2013, and each of these green boxes are the community committee meetings, and the yellow boxes, the executive steering committee, and then the orange are the Board of Education meetings. And it talked about, you know, data collection, the consultants doing site walks and needs assessments, doing focus groups, doing visioning and program standards, developing the master plan, then going in and estimating the cost, getting to that number, these final deliverables, and then additional community outreach from there. So, and this process was you know, basically a little over a year. So that is an extremely fast overview of what we did 7 years ago. I think questions. Well, questions at this time, it could be good right next.
Brian, if I may, this is Ann. I just wanted to say, for the $650 million bond, there was not the intention to do $650 million worth of work. The actual work was estimated to be closer to 400 million, 420, I think. But because there would be price increases in it and other things, and it was estimated to take 10 years, I think, to do all the work in Measure E. So even though it's 1/3 of what was estimated to be needed, 1/3 was not what would be accomplished in Measure E. Also, I put a link to the long-range facility plan in the chat for anybody who wants to be able to look at that. I think it's a really interesting document.
Thank you, Ann. Any other questions or comments about, has this been helpful even? Antonio.
I don't know how to raise my hand in the chat. So how much of this was consultant led? So for example, this end product, the 300-page document, and how much of it was steering committee led or the larger committee? How would you allocate the work allocation? And what was the consultant team like in terms of size, if the executive committee, or sorry, the steering committee got a insight into that?
And I welcome anybody on staff if you've researched it or if anybody remembers better than I do. Well, I mean, the vast majority was the consultant, and I'm sure staff, a lot of staff time as well.
Yeah, definitely the product was the consultant put out the product, the final documents.
Yeah, and you can see each of these yellow boxes represents at least 2 or 3 hours of time. Each of the green boxes, these 2 rows are the community, the core community piece of it. And each of these green boxes was probably at least 3 hours of time. And then we had town halls and school meetings. Each site each site had a slot with the consultant. So each principal, and it was done. The principal decided how to do that. I happened to do it for Parkmont, so each principal could bring in, a couple of people with the consultant to talk about that school specific needs. I think that would be an area that might be worth putting more thought into this time. Yeah, did I answer your question? And then I know, Kelly, you started some discussions with the consultant, although as you just shared in CBOC, that's still early, but perhaps if there's anything you want to add about, already about how similar or dissimilar this is, or any thoughts you have, or even questions.
I apologize, Brian, but your screen froze on me, so I did not quite understand or hear your question.
Oh, is there anything based on what you and the consultant have talked about so far? Is there anything you want to share about how similar this effort will be versus the 7 years ago?
Oh, no, absolutely. This is very good, and thank you so much for sharing this. This is very good information, and the process that has been identified is very similar to the process that we will begin embarking upon for this next long-range facilities master plan. Of course, the difference is going to be that this is going to be done via Zoom, and there will be very few, unless the shelter in place and our situation changes with the virus, most of this interview and coordination efforts are going to be done remotely. And so that's the most significant difference that I can share with you all. The other thing that also is going to be a little different, as you stated earlier, the district's priorities and their needs are different than what was established in 2014. And so as we go through this document, and as they go through all the facilities, there probably is going to be things that change based on age, use, wear and tear. And because we are in declining enrollment, the need that we established in 2014 is different than the need that we're going to establish in 2021. So we'll have those kinds of conversations and those types of analysis done so that we can address what our current needs are, what our current priorities are, and basically figure out what it is we're going to do for maybe the next 10 years. So, and we're in the process right now of finalizing the contract and contract language with the consultant to complete these services. We had hoped that we would have done it sooner, but you know, we've been just back and forth with our attorney, their attorney, and language to make sure that, you know, everybody's getting the best of what they should have based on what we've agreed to and the scope of work. So we should have that finalized sometime this week. And they're planning on mobilizing and getting started, hopefully before we leave for break, so that come back from Christmas break, they'll be ready to be fully engaged with FUSD staff and site staff as well.
Thank you. So actually, going back to this briefly, so there's the actual work of coming up with the plan, but you know, as you can see, there's also a bunch of work just running the process of executing the plan, and I think that's where well, this is my opinion. That's where I think FAC being involved in part of that could be really valuable, because there was a lot of value to having a community/staff executive steering committee in the last process. And that executive steering committee did great things, like help figure out how to package all this information in a way that the long range facilities planning committee of 40 people could process, and later on in the town halls and whatnot. So so that's kind of the scope of the planning process, and how the planning process is being run will be I think an interesting topic.
Well, we definitely will have an opportunity to talk about this more once we have an idea of, you know, who they are planning on to be assigned to do these tasks, and then how we begin to poll our community and gather support as well as participation in all these various activities. One of the first things that they're doing, in fact, I sent them today a list of all of the school sites, contact the school principals, as well as our directors of our primary, secondary, and high school education, so that they can begin to coordinate with them and have them identify the staff that they want to have available to participate and be part of that process as they begin to evaluate the school sites and develop surveys and, you know, priorities in terms of, you know, wish lists versus programming. And so there's lots of little things that are going to kind of be going on at the same time, of information that will be collected and then presented to the larger body, who, and I will be sending out information as well as questionnaires for people to solicit participation on these committees, so that we can be ready when that information is gathered, that our teams of folks will already be assembled and be prepared to begin to digest that information as it comes.
And Brian, I want to defer to you, but I have Liz and Cecily with hands raised. So when you want to take questions.
Oh, please, thank you. I can't see the hands raised. So yes, please.
And then one other point, if you
Cecily.
stop sharing your screen, it may help, because you might have bandwidth issues because your video is choppy.
Okay, cool. I'll stop sharing then.
Perfect. Now we can see everybody.
Yeah, so Cecily.
Yeah, maybe there's
You're on
somewhere
mute.
you can put, oh, am I unmuted now?
Oh, I hear you.
Okay. Is there somewhere maybe that I could be pointed to just get a little better understanding about the background of what, is this something that the school district is starting because we're kind of at the 10-year mark-ish to restart it, and we're just wondering about our committee's role in it. I just am a little unclear on that part, so that's my question.
Can I answer that, Brian?
I was going to turn it over to you. Yes.
Oh, okay. So Cecily, the long range facilities master plan is a process that most school districts go through about every 5 years. So for us, we're a little bit late in terms of us updating ours. And so it's not anything that's unusual, but it's just a regular process that districts go through to, one, establish education standards and identify what their school facilities needs would be. And it's done so it's done every 5 years on a comprehensive level, but then it's updated every 2 years because that is the best practice standard, that things change pretty quickly over a 2 to 3 year period of time. And so because we're kind of in the halfway point or almost 3/4 point of our current bond, we also have to look forward. It's kind of like that rolling. You always look every 5 years forward. So we now are planning, since we're coming to the midpoint and a little bit past that midpoint of our current bond, what do we need to start doing to get ready for the next one? So this is one of the steps that's necessary for us to one, do that. But then there's a mandated legislative requirement that we as the school district has to have this information updated on a 5-year basis in order for us to be eligible to get state dollars. And so that's also part of the process that we're going through, is to maintain that we are always in compliance with whatever mandates are there, so that if opportunities for grants become available or any type of programs, Fremont is prepared to be able to respond and participate in those opportunities. So that's kind of what this process is about in a very high level sort of nutshell. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Liz.
Yes, I imagine that once this process gets started, they'll be looking at the work that was accomplished with the bond as it pertains to the long-range facility plan that we have currently. And I do hope that that information is captured in a way that can show the community, we were able to accomplish these things. Certainly, when a bond comes before the community in the future, they're going to want to know that their money wasn't necessarily misspent or wasn't efficacious. And so maybe this long-range facility plan might look a little different than our last one, only because there's been this big bond in between.
If I may reflect back a little bit, what I'm hearing is to make sure the assessment includes, what we've done with the Measure E funds for our schools as well, and that when we go out to the community, that's clear, as well as all the additional needs. Anne.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would think that would be a really important purpose of doing this, is to take things that were on our list and go ahead and remove them because they've been completed. I think that there will always be certain things that we won't know that they need to be done until you open a wall. And what that might include is asbestos abatement. There are things that we don't know that we have wrong with our buildings until we actually get into them, and then you can find, asbestos materials and things like that. That will be an ongoing concern. So the community should be aware of that, but also it can be listed how much of that work has taken place because of this bond. And so I think that is going to be a really important part of this process, is to, be able to say, check, check, check.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments? Well,
yeah, I can't raise my
yes, Antonio.
Yeah, my question. Nope, my question escaped me. Thank you.
Well, I'll add, if you look back at the agenda, there are example subtopics, and these were some of the items, that I think I shared, or that we all shared in the last meeting, that I think are good topics to think about, that help us kind of frame what to do. Like what's the timeline? Even, well, I'll come back to timeline, but what is the FAC's involvement? What are the core goals and principles of this bond? Right? It may be, or not bond, or the core priorities of our next facilities plan. Shouldn't assume it'll turn into a bond, but that is probably what we need. And what are the assumptions? What are the program assumptions? What are our class size assumptions? What are our target school sizes? I'm not saying we change from what the board policy is, but making sure that that's explicit and clear. Our demographic assumptions are hugely important. I'm sure there are others. I think the understanding the facility standards and the program standards and how they've changed, and what our aspirations are, right? What facilities and program standards do we want to bring to our schools in this next 10-year facilities plan? And then how do we engage the community, because it will require tremendous community input and tremendous community support for us to invest in our facilities again. And then I was coming back to timeline, because it was going to turn into a question for Kelly. I didn't know if there had been a discussion of timeline on the process yet or not, but the last one took a year, so.
We initially had talked about it, but since we've been having discussions with them about their contract, they would prefer to go ahead and kind of see what the lay of the land is first before they obligate themselves to a schedule that maybe they wouldn't be able to accomplish everything. So maybe by February, I'll be able to give you the schedule of, all of our activities and what we're, anticipating doing.
And I'll throw in a comment. I'll let go ahead, Antonio, and then I'll add a comment to that.
I'd like to move to extend this for 5 minutes since we're out of time.
No, I'll second that.
You can't second it as the chair, I thought. But but I don't know.
I'll second.
So, I guess we have to, if there's no objection, we'll extend 5 minutes. I think that's how Antonio has been speeding that along in the past. So the comment I wanted to add to the timeline is the timeline of the last one was kind of driven by the desire to float a Prop 39 bond, which requires 55% to pass. Other types of bonds would require 2/3 vote to pass. So passing a bond is a difficult thing. But the desire to float a Prop 39 bond at the time in the June 2014 election, and so so to do that, you work back 6 months because you need time to run an election, and so having the facilities plan in place by January 2014, even that I think was tight. Gave enough time to get the. It was very tight. Seeing Trustee Crosby's reaction was extremely tight. More like 9 months would be better to get your campaign going, because there's a lot of both process and just work for that. So, so just hypothetically, I can't remember the next Prop 39 bond window. I think is March 2022, which would be the primary in 2022, because there's got to be a major election, primary or general election. So January 2021. So yeah, that's 12, 13, 14 months away. March 2022 minus 9 months would be, so about, so in our ideal world, this always scares me when I do this, because in our ideal world, we'd have the plan in place by June 2021. So we have plenty of time to go out and get the community support for the money we're going to need to actually implement the plan. And so I think it's always humbling every time I work backwards on these things, because it takes so much more time than people realize. And so that's kind of the ideal timeline from a March 22 election standpoint. Antonio. Oh, and then Ann, sorry.
So I just have two questions directed at Kelly. So what is the purpose of a long range? You mentioned every 5 years. What is the purpose of a long range facilities plan without a bond or without planning for a bond? So is that just a regular cadence / needed? And then it's connected to my second question, which is more for the community and also committee members. But how are facilities funded typically for school districts? Does it come out of their budget, parcel taxes, or bonds? Are we unusual as compared to other school districts in California?
So let me make sure I heard the first question. So the first question was, what's the need for the long range facilities master plan?
Absent
Outside
any
of
bond.
a bond situation.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second is, how are school districts funded without a bond measure normally?
No. My second question is, how are facilities typically funded for school districts? Is it through the general budget, through a bond, or through a parcel tax? And how is that kind of industry wide, if you will, across California?
Okay. Before I get started, does anybody else have any input or comments before I kind of dive in? Okay. So long range facilities master plans are standard of practice, and it's a standard of care that most school districts, whether you're a K-12, a community college, or a university, it's part of the planning process that they go through on a regular basis to determine basically a needs analysis of an ongoing needs analysis of their facilities as it relates to the facility supporting the instruction. So whether you're getting a bond or not, it's very similar to how, and I don't know how people run their households, but you always have to plan sort of and have a plan ahead of time to know, hey, these are what my expected expenditures will be, as well as my expected outcomes based on those expenditures will be over a certain period of time. And because so if you just take your budget and just amplify it, 400 times, we're just a larger body that has to accommodate multiple variables over that same period of time. And so if we don't plan for it, then we can't manage it. And so it's just a standard practice and best practice in the industry that this is what's done. And it allows us to use the long range facilities master plan, one, to support a bond if that's the direction that you're going in, but it also lays the framework for decisions to be made about either growth or downsizing of a particular organization. And I look at school sites as sort of sub-projects of a bigger project to say, hey, this is what we need, this is what we don't need. And if you're not constantly doing an analysis of what's going on with the moving parts, you're never going to know what you actually have. So we use it for, asset evaluation. So like when we're saying, hey, what's the value of the district and all of its resources at this time? Well, one of the first things they do is they take the long range facilities master plan and look at it and say, hey, these are tangible assets that are now equated into these things that are now, turned into dollars and cents. Developers look at the long range facilities master plan when they come to communities to see exactly what the school district is planning so that they can also plan their developments for growth and expansion based on what they know the school district is going to be doing. Because, you know, most developments that are close to schools that are high performing schools get a higher price tag than those that are in districts where their schools are not that great of a performer. So the long range facilities master plan becomes a very useful tool in many sort of circles of how we do evaluation and what we do for business. Gerald, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you're on point. I had to add something to a second question, but I think you're on point.
Okay. And the other thing to your question of how school districts fund their programs. So the parcel tax in particular is not used for construction. Parcel tax is used to support instruction. So that supports, you know, teachers, additional support services, tutors, you know, those kinds of things that a physical person or tool would be used to support instruction. Your property taxes fund the parcel tax. There is a statewide bond program that the state of California has where they sell bonds and then disperse the funds to all the district schools statewide. And the way that we get access to those funds is that we apply through, there's several programs, but the one that we just talked about in the CBOC meeting is called the Prop 51 program. And basically what that is the state goes and raises hundreds of millions of dollars. Each school district has to apply with a list of projects that they've, you know, said, hey, these are our priorities. We want the state to help us build this. We don't have all the money for it, so we're going to go and ask the state for it. So they then submit their application to the state. The state then evaluates it, decides whether or not they're going to fund it. They don't fund it at 100%. They only fund it at a 50, they call it a 50-50 match. So if we submit a project that says, hey, you know, we need $17 million to build this new wing on an elementary school. Well, the state will say, great, show me the need. We then refer back to our long range facilities master plan to say, hey, in our demographics to say, hey, we have growth in this area. We're going to need this new facility to accommodate this, but yet we don't have all the money. So Mr. State, we want you to, you know, go ahead and fund us. So then the state then approves it or disapproves it, or they put us on a waiting list. So if you can imagine, there's hundreds of school districts statewide. We basically have to get in line and hopefully get funded. And that's why the school board works with various legislators and lobbyists to basically negotiate on our behalf to make sure that we're considered and evaluated for access to those dollars. So every year when the budget comes out, there's a list of projects that are funded from the state that will identify what school districts get what projects funded. Fremont got a few last year. We may not get any next year. We don't know until we know what it's almost like a lottery system, what's going to happen based on how much money the state actually has. And so that report or that budget comes out in draft form in March. And then in May, the final budget is then presented and the final funding of whatever has been identified is put in that report. And that's then when we have to scramble and say, okay, our project's been identified. Let's get the rest of our paperwork in. And so we have an outside consultant who helps us to manage that process and document all of our projects and expenses and get that paperwork in a timely fashion so that we can be considered kind of first in line when those funds become available. And so there's that pot of money. And then there's another pot of money called deferred maintenance. And so each school district gets a certain amount of money to support and provide resources for the maintenance of their facilities. And it's never enough. It's always just a portion of what we need, but that's also how we get funds to cover paving projects or lighting projects or painting, or if a roof falls in or things like that. So we have about 5 different funds that we can pull from, that we combine together to put together the funds for us to do all the construction and maintenance for all the programs. So Gerald, you said you wanted to answer a question as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to that. The other methods, like you said, the general fund, but that's typically used for upkeep, especially on the medium to larger size school districts. You're not going to be able to fund major infrastructure out of the general fund. Some school districts receive donations from alumni or businesses or whatever that will fund infrastructure. Excuse me, but the industry standard is general obligation bonds. If you want to do major capital infrastructure, it's going to be through a general obligation bond that you put out on the open market. So this is very, very standard. And I think the 2 of the biggest programs I worked on were the Los Angeles Community College District and the Los Angeles Unified School District. And between 2000 and 2016, LAUSD raised close to $19 billion in funding, general obligation bonds for infrastructure. And LACCD between 2000 and 2016 raised about $12.5 billion in general obligation bonds for funding. So this is definitely the industry standard through general obligation bonds.
So thank you. We are over time, and we should move on. And I'm dying to turn the chair back over to Antonio. But I know Trustee Crosby had something, and if there's a motion to extend 5 more minutes for her.
I wouldn't need.
Moved.
Okay. Seeing if there's no objection, then we'll go ahead and get with Trustee Crosby.
I definitely won't need that much time. I just wanted to make sure it was clear to everyone that with the state's school facility bonds, it used to be that they did them about every 2 years. And under Jerry Brown, he did not agree with borrowing, which basically bonds is borrowing, to build facilities. He thought it was because of the rate you pay back, it was not a good deal. And so we had almost no bonds for 10 years. And so that's why the state is so far behind. In addition, it used to be that it was come first in line, if you got in line, you got what you wanted. But districts like LA Unified were very good at having the money to pay the consultants to get in line. So it was realized that it was a very unequitable system. So now every year they are reevaluating what the needs are, which means that we could have things in line and that would not get funded repeatedly, because something, if there's a big fire and a school building burns to the ground, of course, they'll put that at the beginning of the line. So I just want to make sure that everyone understood that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And with that, we'll close this item, and I'll turn it back over to Antonio.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And let me just find the agenda real quick. So if I could, we're now at liaison reports and discussion. If anybody from the MIP or MIP plus SDI task force has anything to summarize, I would be deferring to Judy, Sharon, and I believe Robert, our members.
I can share information unless Robert would like to do it.
I'm not a member anymore.
Oh, I thought you were.
No, they decided they only wanted 2.
Oh, okay. So I'll try and summarize what transpired at the meeting in November. And staff met with the Assistant Superintendent, Leticia Salinas, and reviewed the space requirements for Azaveda. And it was determined that for this current year, 2020-2021, the space was sufficient to carry the program for MIP. It was also reported because the task force had a question about the computer labs, the computer lab. They may have more than one, and whether or not that classroom could be used for MIP and not hold the computer lab. And they reported to us that it could not be used as a regular classroom. It had to be maintained as the computer lab. So that was not an option to be included in any available classroom space at Azaveda. A question also arose from the task force about the number of special day classes that are currently housed at Azaveda. And I'm not sure of the number. Staff was going to check with special ed. When I worked there, there were 5 special ed classrooms. And they're going to talk to special ed and inquire about the feasibility of possibly, you know, how likely is it, could it be that those classrooms could be moved to a different site. So I don't know that that's feasible at all, since we don't know the number of students whose home school that is, that are currently in those classes. And so that we remain, you know, we wait to see what the response is to that. The other thing that they talked about was, hold on, let me find my notes. They had discussion again about possibly looking at Blaco as like a sister site for the MIP program going forward, because once RICS is opened up and the classes that were moved from Glankler to Blaco because they had increased enrollment, those classrooms will then be vacated at Blaco and moved to the RICS site. So that will create space in order to accommodate the MIP program. And because it's virtually in the same vicinity, it should not be that difficult. They talked about Laylahurst School, and that we would be FUSD would be taking full possession, you know, at the end of the year. And I don't remember who made the statement. I believe it was Trustee Sweeney, but he shared some information that the city of Fremont projects approximately 14,000 units over the next 15 years. So he shared that with the group. And then the group asked for staff to have a conversation with the principal of Hopkins, Mr. Corey Brown, to confirm the understanding that whether or not they can or cannot accommodate the MIP program once Hopkins transitions from a junior high to a middle school. So we're waiting to get that information back as well. And that's about it. Our next meeting is December 14th. So hopefully there will be some more progress made in what we're doing long-term.
Sharon, if I might add, anybody can look at some capacity reports that were presented to us at that meeting.
Yes.
On the, I think it's the federal and state programs website. They put the MIP SDI minutes there, and there's some links there to capacity reports that were presented by, I think, Kelly at that meeting. And then low enrolled school information, so that we not only look at Bringhurst or Blaco, we're looking at every school that's low enrolled.
Correct.
And then the last thing was at our next meeting, we'll be talking about some options after receiving that data. I thought it was, just my personal opinion, really well done. The information we received was really accurate, and I think we would be able to make a informed recommendation based on the information we received.
I agree.
I'd like to ask if there's any objection to extending for 5 minutes, because we've exhausted time, but I see hands in the queue. Seeing no objections, I'll add another 5 minutes to my timer. Luisa?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I missed the invite. I joined a little late, but my question is regarding the school that's here near Marshall Park. And I understand there is some issue with a high pressure gas pipeline. And I just wanted to know what is the plan for that space, since now that we've asked Stratford to leave. And it was supposed to be for the Spanish immersion, but I do think that maybe the school with the pandemic and the need to maybe have more space in between the children. And I just don't know if we should give up that space, or is that a done deal? And I do think that maybe we could look at a risk analysis, because in order for that to be a catastrophic issue, you would have to have an earthquake occur while the children are in school and the gas pipeline burst. And so maybe the likelihood of that is actually very, very low. And maybe there could be something that could be done working with PG&E to slip line the line, to put additional measures. I just don't know what the issue is. Yeah, I see your hand raised. My time's up. Yes.
No, it's not about time, but I do want to limit the scope of the discussion to the MIP/SDI report. But I do note that your comments are generally about SDI MIP. So I'll hand it back to Kelly, but then just kind of an FY for moving forward, we will limit the discussion to items within the scope of the item. Go ahead, Kelly.
So, and I'll answer to make sure that it stays within the scope of the discussion. So currently the 7-Eleven committee has been convened to discuss the Marshall site, and they are in the process of doing the evaluation that you're speaking of right now. And one of the discussions that we have had within the 7-Eleven committee is to not consider the Marshall site for the SIP program based on board action that was taken in 2019 with regard to that site. So any considerations for having Fremont Unified students on that site or having it used for any educational purposes has been deemed not allowed by our board. And they made a decision back in 2019 to basically make that decision. As far as the SIP program goes, the additional sites that are being considered have been discussed in the MIP SDI meeting, and they are looking at several sites for consolidation of that program. And so we will be discussing that further on the 14th. And there have been several discussions that will include Lila Bringhurst, or looking at also doing sister schools for the two programs at various locations based on where their highest concentration of enrollment is, and just a host of things. But we are addressing that, and Marshall is not an item. Marshall site is not a consideration for the SIP program at this time.
Or for any school, as I understand.
Correct.
Well, that's interesting that the board is maybe not willing to consider revisiting that decision based on space and COVID and all that. So,
well, it's really not based on space. It's based on, the items that they had evaluated to make that determination. So I think the best thing to do would be to go back to that board item and look at the decision. And I think the transcript will allow you to see why they based their decision the way that they did.
Okay.
And so I'll ask the body for 5 more minutes since we have 2 people in queue. But I'm actually going to hold it for a vote since we've extended it already once. So are people interested in doing so? If so, please make a motion. Any voting member?
I move we extend 5 minutes.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. So I have your names, Trustee Crosby and Brian. if you could lower your hands. All in favor of extending for 5 additional minutes, please raise your physical or virtual hand. All right, please lower your hands. And then anyone opposed? Great, the ayes have it. So go ahead, Trustee Crosby.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I don't know whether or not the committee actually looked at the Bringhurst agreement, but there is an agreement. Part of the agreement says that Bringhurst cannot be used except it has to be available to the communities in the development for a certain period of time. And I don't believe that clock starts running until after we've actually received the property. Now, I could be wrong on that, but I think that the committee really needs to be looking at that. And in addition, I would just say, Antonio, since 7-Eleven committee was not actually discussed, there's also misinformation in that item as well, which says the future plans to review the horse property in Patterson Ranch. 7-Eleven committee was never asked by the board to do either of those things. So if they have that in their planning, they need to take it out.
Sorry, could you clarify, is that in our minutes or what needs to be corrected?
In your agenda. No. In your agenda, you have it. And it's a report on the 7-Eleven committee. And at the end of that report, it says future plans to review horse property in Patterson Ranch sites, which the 7-Eleven committee was not asked by the board to do.
Oh yeah, that's in the minutes. That's in the minutes section, correct? And that.
Sorry, I misread it as part of the agenda. My
Got
bad.
it. So let me quickly, because we may have to move to reconsider if that's incorrect.
I think that's correct from the standpoint of that's what was communicated in the last meeting. There sounds like there's a bigger conversation between staff and the board.
If I may, I'm on the 7-Eleven committee, and when we were discussing surplusing property, we took it to mean that Marshall was the first order of business, but that because there are pending deadlines for these other surplus properties, that they may also come on our radar.
When the item was passed by the board specifically, it said Marshall only. That was the motion.
Well, I'll take that back to the committee then.
Okay, so yes, so noting Brian's point, that was the factual discussion that we had within 7-Eleven committee, but there does seem to be that need for that conversation. And so I hope that it's straightened out soon. Thank you, Trustee Crosby. Brian?
Two quick things. One that probably belongs, well, that'll bring up in more detail under future meeting topics. But since Ms. Coco brought it up, I do want to follow up on the 14K additional housing projection. But I'll talk about that in future meeting topics. But the question here, I wanted to ask about the low enrolled schools. Does that include considering what happens when we have all the middle schools up and running, right? Well, so when we have all the middle schools up and running, I would expect we'd have even more low enrolled schools that may even give us more options for the SDI or the MIP programs.
Kelly, are you gonna address that?
Yes, I can. Yes, we are looking at that, Brian, and the initial snapshot of the low enrolled schools was taken without the middle school conversion information. And now at this next meeting, we will have that information and then take another look to see, pre-conversion, post-conversion, where those numbers then shake out and how those schools are impacted and which ones will either be leveled out because they're farming kids off to other sites because they're at capacity, or if everything will be able to, be homeschool kids can go to their home schools and not be sent to someplace else. So, but yes, we are evaluating that.
Thank you. And I'll just add that transparency has been great. It's posted. The meeting is broadcast. You can go watch. I did watch the meeting. the recording on YouTube. So thank you for the transparency and the work to do that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I think that's it. So now we can move to thoughts on future meeting topics. Obviously, given the discussions about Laylahurst, I think I'll take Trustee Crosby's point about agendizing, you know, perhaps a brief discussion on the Bringhurst agreement, again, for our education. I know we have discussed it, but it might have been in 2018. I think that the agreement was made available to committee members, but we have new committee members and it's a much more topical point. So I'd like to bring that back. But now I'll defer to other committee members since that's the purpose of this item. Brian.
Yes, regarding the city of Fremont, or regarding Trustee Sweeney's comments about the city of Fremont projecting 14,000 units of housing, I researched that and I think it's a useful topic to bring back to the FAC, given that could impact our planning. This is the ABAG requirements based on the regional housing needs allocation. And the city council received a report on that on September 15th, 2020. And so I think it would be great to get the city to share context with us on that and for our demographer to take that into account. And so the specific ask would be kind of an informational item, ideally from the city, walking us through what this means, and then the discussion on how that might impact our school facilities planning.
So I typically ask for, just so everybody else knows, to see if this is an interest of the committee. So I look for 3 other people who support hearing this topic. So if you could raise your either virtual or physical hands, if you're interested in such a topic being raised. Okay, great. So we have that interest. So an informational item from the city on these future developments. It's under ABAG. And could you repeat the date that this was discussed at the city level?
September 15th, 2020. And I can share the link to the report with you, and Kelly, and then offline, and you can share it with the whole committee.
That'd be great. Kelly, given that we have our next agenda item, or sorry, next meeting already planned, would you be able to coordinate with the city to see if they could have a representative speak at our next meeting? And if they're not available for the next one, then
I can ask them if they're available, but if they're not available, I can maybe ask them to send a written response or some type of documentation to speak to that.
I think
from a planning standpoint, as you talk to them, it may make sense for February, March, or April meeting, right? It doesn't have to be right away.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I think it'd be super valuable to have the city there just to explain the whole thing, because I think it would be super valuable. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I want to limit conversation, but yes, I agree with that approach. I don't see the urgency, so we would, yeah, that would be great. Okay. So if they're not available for January, we have other options.
I'll see what I can do.
Thank you. Brian, do you have follow-up?
No. The long-range master facilities plan is, I'm hoping, the really big one in January.
Right. So there would be discussion. So let me get a feel for it, a follow-up for the long-range facilities plan process. Just to remind the committee, we would have started conversations with a consultant. Do you expect that we would have a contract in place, Kelly, pending board approval?
A contract for
the consultant, or did I miss that that's already been done?
Which consultant? No, the board has already approved their agreement. We just need to actually execute it. So that's doesn't have to be taken back to board.
Oh, okay, great. So then for the January meeting, which let me see, is it the first Wednesday? It's January 13th. Would we expect to have, you know, more updates from the district side to share to further inform?
You probably have more information from me, but it will be unlikely that you would have any relevant or information that would be valuable to you from the consultant at that point. But probably February would be a better time for them to come and possibly speak to any questions or because by then we should have process and intent and all those things kind of outlined and more information to share with you all.
So my recommendation, given Kelly's comments, would be to agendize this in February. But if people are interested in doing so in January, please, let's start by, you know, raising your hands. Doesn't have to be a formal vote, but. Okay, so I will bring back.
Raise my hand. Wait, yeah, it'll be, yeah.
It'll be a more valuable use of our time if we wait till February, I believe. So February it is. I think that concludes the time on thoughts on future meeting topics. So just to adjourn us, I wanted to thank Brian for chairing the LRFP process part of the agenda. That was short notice and I really appreciated that. And it was a very valuable walkthrough for all of us who were not able to participate in that process. So thank you, Brian. Other than that, we can adjourn. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening. And we'll see you in January.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you, everyone.